Hello, hello. I guess we're live. I assume so.
I think Funky didn't manage to make it over. So maybe I can introduce this one. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
So really excited about this panel. Oh, here's Funky. Really excited about this panel. I'm a huge fan of Evrloot and Ajuna. And just want to throw out there that actually, Evrloot and Ajuna are up there among the most transacted with apps and chains in Talisman, and specifically Evrloot is probably the second most transacted with DApp ever in Talisman. And so these guys are really driving forward NFTs and gaming in Polkadot. But yeah, where's our moderator? Do we know?
I guess we have to wing
it. Well,
he was in the previous room.
Okay. Well, but hey, everybody, it's good to be here.
Introducing yourselves and the projects.
Sure, I'll do that. Deckard, if it's okay, I'll start. So, hey everyone, I'm Nicholas from Ajuna Network. I'm one of the co-founders and leading the business development. My background sort of initially went through corporate world, went through let's say my first entrepreneurial experience in the traditional, what we call traditional, let's say internet space right now, was building a Netflix for fitness, and moved to the blockchain space about 6-7 years ago, always sort of in that intersection between gaming and infrastructure. And a few years ago, we joined forces with Cedric, who was on his own, let's say, gaming adventures, trying to encode logic on top of the Bitcoin protocol. Then he tried to do the same thing later on with Dash, and yeah, eventually we found ourselves to Substrate, and we haven't looked back since. So yeah, that's a short introduction about myself.
Cool. Then I go next. My name is Deckard. From Evrloot. My background is in business informatics. I've done the route consulting, then corporate life. It's just ending. So like the last 2 weeks, it's been the process of going full-time Web3, which is very exciting for me. And yeah, we're doing Evrloot. Evrloot is really a passion project. It changed the way I see my job, and it changed the way how all of the team sees their job. So we're in the process of making this really a professional company, and but keeping kind of the basic ethos. And yeah, Evrloot is a dark fantasy RPG that is very going deep into lore, going deep into immersive gameplay, and remark NFTs to have a true ownership of your progress. And the most important thing for us, it has to be truly fun. Like, because if the game isn't fun and if the gameplay loop isn't the thing that you want to do, we don't believe it can be called a game. So that's our main focus of getting there. We're currently disabled and starting up at Moonbeam soon again. Pretty excited for that. Thanks for having me.
Hey there, sorry for being late. I was stuck in the previous room. I thought you guys were late, but it was me. So I'm Steven. I'm a PM lead developer at Remark, and I'm also building an NFT project, which also will be focused on gaming, which is Nick Soldiers. So most of the questions I'll be asking are real questions me as a game developer have. But we'll be happy to add your questions. So let's get this started. I want to start asking you about how do you keep resources limited? Like how do you keep that balance between taps and sinks? Like, so things there are not too much of the resources so they keep their value. You want to take that first, Nick?
Sure, I'll try to give it a go. So obviously, the way that you manage your in-game economy is quite important, not only for the sort of fun or the hook of the game, but also for the longevity of the game. So maybe an example that I can use is what we tried to do with the awesome Ajuna avatars of season 1. So what you do there is, after you start sort of with that basic, let's say, premise that you know what your game loop is going to be, then start sort of the discovery of the resources. And once you set sort of those initial rules of how you want sort of your economy to play, one of the big part of it is doing essentially, let's say, testing simulations or sort of running through the game loop continuously. Now that we'll do both manually, but we also do it in an automated way. Sort of Cedric usually will sort of spin up, as we say, a few bots, which will run through the simulation. And what you're trying to sort of understand at that point is the different curves, right? And by curves, we mean is sort of the resource allocation that we're doing or the probability of those resources ending up in the right sort of allocation that we want. Most times what happens is that we will end up with an abundance, let's say, of some resource, which will give us that indication that it's sort of quite unbalanced. But yeah, I'm sure that maybe Deckard could also give a bit of an insight here with the things that they're doing with Evrloot and specifically in these types of games.
Yeah, I can do that. So taps and things, yeah, there is. It's a big important thing for the resource economy. There are even tools that simulate that. So there is even something like machinations. I don't know if you heard about it. So we can simulate all that parts. Maybe you referred to that even. So parts of, for example, taps is, for example, you can imagine if you don't know Evrloot, you can go with your NFT, your character NFTs, and go fishing. And with the fishing process, with that, say you've been 4 hours at fishing, you bring back a rare fish, so you did a good catch, and you basically mint that from thin air. So it's the supply increases. It's a tap. And how do we make sure that we have that interesting? So there are a few things where this goes in. So imagine, for example, this fish you caught. There are a few ways to process that fish further on in the chain. So you could either equip it in your fishing board. It might be a rare shark that you don't have, so you want to have it showcased in your remark NFT where you can place it and say, like, I caught this one. You might not have it, so I'm going to brag with that. So it disappears in there for the right of bragging. So you kind of have a limited time sink. And the other hand is like, we can chop these fish up and make bait out of it to just catch like better fish with it. So there is some kind of disassembling on this. There is crafting in general, like even if you take more than fish, if you take, for example, wood logging and something like this, obviously going in some game mechanics now, but then the whole crafting process of burning stuff for something else and for the new thing is something that is quite challenging to supervise. That you see that the volume that you have out there is the volume you intend to be, but it's also very interesting as a game developer to see these streams going on, because like these were thought experiments, and then you see how it's getting real and people really trade with it. And this is, for me, one of the most awesome things to really watch your thought creation going live and seeing people trade that, and stuff gets scarce. What you didn't think was scarce, what you didn't plan on going scarce, and yeah, it's very interesting.
I think one of the important things, and I've seen this in Evrloot, is that resources, you have different ways to use resources. So that's also important to have different ways to spend them, and also to make it interesting, which goes to my next question. How do you keep the game interesting? Like, for instance, many games have the grinding part, like going to get logs so you can advance. What advice would you give on keeping it interesting?
I think this really depends on the type of genre that the game is in. Generally, I think a rule that we all can understand about gaming is that it's that combination of the right amount of time until you give the next dopamine, let's say, shot. So if you're playing, for example, a first-person shooter, the way that game loop works is very fast, and it needs sort of like, every few seconds, every few, I don't know, maybe minutes, there needs to be an action, right? Sort of something like that. When you're playing more role-playing games, that sort of loop allows probably for more quieter moments, or moments which you can sort of interact with different parts of the game. So inventory management, right? Something that if you ask somebody playing a first-person shooter game is not interesting at all, and probably one of the most annoying parts of the game itself. If you ask somebody who's playing a role-playing game, that sort of screen where it's my inventory, it's my character, is probably the single most important screen for me to begin that journey. And I'll spend X amount of time to make sure that that sort of character is in there. So really, there's not a great answer in terms of sort of what that combination is. And I would say that generally stick with what works well within a genre. Trying to change the tempo of a genre usually will sort of result in pretty broken economies.
Yeah. I wrote down a few points towards that. I think one thing is game mechanics from my side, like new game mechanics. For example, how do I keep Evrloot interesting? So for now, it has been a project where you could combine your NFTs and do some missions on it, and you had kind of bragging rights on the most coolest NFTs you have there. One thing is we are introducing with Expeditions a new mechanic where we're introducing like a roguelike game mechanic where people can use that, and stuff that was previously lying around and had some metadata which you didn't know what happened was suddenly interesting. So people started shifting their attention, see like, oh, I have this axe and this has like this strength that could be important for that next step. So that creates always a tension because people know we've planned something for stuff that is lying around. So there is always this tension, like what happens with that? So this is one thing. Then I think there is one special thing that we're having with Web3 gaming, that we have people much closer, the people that play our games are much closer aligned with ourselves in terms of collaboration because they believe in the goal. They invested some amount of money, time, whatever it is, and this creates a participation in the game that keeps games interesting. So we try to do it, for example, in that way that we make global events in the game. So let's say we have a city, this desert city, something happens there and we do some kind of voting. For example, there's a trader and he's identified and people like can with pitchforks stand outside of the house. Do we burn the house down or do we let him live? And this kind of influences the story for everyone. The house burns down for everyone to see. So we're trying to get through small lore adaptations that people can participate in, kind of get this participation feeling. Plus people obviously already having invested in the game themselves and are much more aligned with the game than in classic Web2 gaming, I feel, which is a good thing for us, definitely. Then we have lore, which we always advance, and we have the content where I think where games can advance. So for example, if you have one mechanic, like say the expeditions or with the seasons with awesome Ajuna avatars and so on, if you create new content for this, you can like warm that up and spicing it up with different new mechanics coming in. Yeah, I think you can give it a fresh paint sometimes. But as you said, like it's very interesting to plan the carrot on the stick thing. And balance that with OG values, because people that have invested in us a year ago expect their value to grow, while they also want to have the carrot on the stick being laid out in front, because that's what a game does. And balancing this is a very interesting topic.
Okay, before we go back to OGs, because I have a question on that, I want to know, there is this thing that on regular, like on classic games, you buy the game and they, or even if it's a web game, a multiplayer, the owners of the game, they have full control, right? But here we are trying to give most of the control to the players, to the holders of the NFT, because they can sell their NFTs or the resources they craft or everything. They can sell them any moment. They own their experience. But sometimes you kind of need to do some changes. Like for instance, you're like you see the world is flooding with logs, so maybe you start giving less logs on some expedition. Or for instance, you created a sword and you put it out there for a few lucky people, but that sword made players OP, right? So it made them too powerful. So you need to adjust that. How would you handle that? How much control should we as game developers keep so we don't annoy users, but we still have a balanced game?
Yeah, I think that's a tough question. It's a good question. I would start. The blockchain space in general has a very big problem with messaging when we're talking towards, let's say specifically game developers, because we're shouting things like player ownership or sort of player governance, when if you see or talk with a developer's day-to-day life, even from a small to a big studio, a lot of the times they're actually being harassed by the gamers who passionately still play the game, but they are harassed about their broken game, about why they're not updating this and this and that. So telling actually a game developer, hey, would you actually like now to have that user actually have a say because now he's also an investor? It's probably going to scare him off. The second part, I think that is very again misconceiving, is that when we say something being on chain, sort of, or participation, that should not mean for a developer that I cannot bug fix my game, right? That I cannot balance my game. If you've created, and that's sort of where maybe the good advice for developers should be, is that if you're creating an economy which could be damaged from you having to rebalance a game, then you've probably designed it in the wrong way. If you've allowed governance inside a game where you could allow users sort of to come in and break the economy of a game, again, probably sort of you've used that governance, I would say, in a wrong way. The opportunity, I think, that is here with developers is that by getting a community early on involved, is that can at the same time act as your marketing machine, as sort of the way that you can move from one snapshot to the other, as your fundraising mechanism, and make sure that at the end of the day, what you're delivering is sort of designed, tailored for the users that at the end of the day you want to delight.
I have very mixed feeling about my answer here, because it has a lot of light and shadow, as you just pointed out. I think I see it the same way. When I reference to what World of Warcraft did and what pitfall there was, I think that went to non-perfect experience. So they listened a lot to people that were complaining about traveling times, and people saying, I want a more convenience, I'm spending so much time with it. So they implemented more and more quality of life implementations. So I can just join a dungeon browser and I will be teleported to this dungeon. And then afterwards, people complain and say, like, this game isn't immersive anymore because I'm just teleporting to stuff, right? So I don't feel the world anymore because I'm getting so much more convenience. And I think this just serves as an example for something where I believe some core elements can and should be opened, and some other elements I'm not so sure to which degree they should be opened, because still the game benefits off, and this sounds a bit crazy, but it's the game developers are still kind of the gods of this ecosystem in some way, and design it in a way that's fun. And if you let it free floating, I don't see yet a mechanism or a mathematical function that always goes back to this fun equivalent that brings that in. And I don't see that self-regulation right now happening, but I might be like, I'd love to be surprised on that. But I still think that there is a decent amount of moderation to be done, although parts and aspects of them can definitely be democratized.
Yeah, I think we need to keep some sort of control and probably be very clear about it in communication with the holders. So I think we may have just a chance for a last question. What would you advise for someone who's creating a new Web3 game?
I'll try and keep it short. I would really, because of you're facing a couple of big hurdles that you need to be aware of, and I think the biggest one is accessibility, which we tend to ignore. The way that most people will access a game today is either through an app store on the mobile phone or a game store on a PlayStation, let's say, or another device. Most of these app stores are not friendly to Web3 games. So manage your resources in the beginning correctly. Don't try to make, I would say, the next Call of Duty, right? You're probably going to have quite a rough time. So I would say generally embrace the technology. Don't try to work around it. Don't try to circumvent it. Don't try to make it too Web2, right? Because it's sort of, I think, at least in my opinion, it misses the point sort of right now. Just a short reminder, in 2000, at the same time, the Nokia phone came out and everybody was playing Snake on that phone, right on a dot matrix screen. At the same year, the PlayStation 2 was out. So you can see the difference in these devices and the capabilities was massive. Same way I would say I see the difference between what you can create. But try and create experiments, use the technology, embrace it, and yeah, let's try and find new experiences that sort of can delight gamers.
And my advice is to just start and don't fear what you can't do, but just start with it, because I never thought I'd be a game developer. We just started with it and it got so much passion. So I wanna, like, we have way too little people caring about actual end user applications. So I wanna, everyone who's in there who is interested, just do it. It's so much fun.
Totally. Do we have time for more? I don't think so. Funky, welcome. Thank you, guys. It was great, very insightful for me, and I hope for other game developers as well.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.